Our government borrows this money from an agency known as the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System was founded in 1913, and basically what it really is a foreign-owned banking consortium. It's a private corporation. Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. It's a private corporation, for-profit corporation, mostly foreign-owned, and it has been given the ability to issue money created out of nothing. That's OTA, out of thin air money. And that means it's totally unbacked. There is no tangible asset, no tangible anything behind this money, but it's created out of nothing. And it's loaned to the federal government at interest. And of course, this means that it is added to the debt, and this is further debt put on the backs of existing debt, which is already burdening the average taxpayer. Now, as an aside on this, the United States up until 1913, Congress had the right and the duty to issue our own currency debt-free. And they did so from the inception of the nation up until 1913, when Congress, in their infinite wisdom, violated the Constitution and gave this power up and gave it to this privately owned foreign corporation known as the Federal Reserve System. We gave up the ability to create debt-free money to a privately owned foreign corporation so that they can issue the money and charge us interest for the use of our own money forever. Can you kind of conceive of what is taking place with this? This isn't accidental. There's something a little bit worse about this. It goes a little bit step further. Nobody thinks about this. Is it just going on our backs as taxpayers? It goes a step beyond that. It goes on our children, our grandchildren. We're such a Christian country that we're going to borrow money that we don't have so we can give it away and create additional debt to put on our own and our children and our unborn generations' backs. Is that a moral thing to do? Has anybody actually thought this out to its logical end? This is one of the most evil and immoral things any nation could ever conceive of doing. And it's not just foreign aid, it's just everything else that our government does in operations. What's the solution? What's the solution? I think a great deal of the solution lies in the parable of the Good Samaritan. Anybody ever hear that? Basically, the parable goes something like this. There's a main highway, not exactly an interstate by our standards, but it was a main highway thoroughfare in those days, somewhere in Palestine. And there's a guy lying in the ditch. He's been beat half to death, robbed, probably by the Crips and Bloods of his time, and left for dead. Along comes a high priest, a Levite or whatever he was, and he sees this guy in the ditch, and he crosses over to the opposite side of the road, sticks his nose in the air, and ignores him and goes on his way. A little bit later, the Levite comes down. He's another member of the clergy, and he sees this guy in the ditch, crosses over to the other side of the road, keeps his nose in the air, and walks off and ignores him. A little bit later, we have this fellow known as a Samaritan. A Samaritan comes down here and sees this guy in a ditch. He realizes this guy is half dead. He realizes if he doesn't do something, this guy's going to die. So he loads him up, puts him on his pony or his donkey, takes him to the inn, or an inn. He makes an arrangement with the innkeeper, pays the innkeeper, and says, if you'll take care of this guy and do whatever it takes, if he gets back on his feet, he says, wonderful. And he says, I will be back through here again. He probably, but it was monthly or who knows, on a supply mission or whatever, business mission or something. He would stop back and he would pay anything over and above what it may have cost the innkeeper to do this. And that's basically all the Bible tells us about the story. Well, what can we learn from this? Well, it's pretty obvious from the story. The guy did get healed. The innkeeper did his job. and did what he was committed to do. And the guy got well. He probably went home to his family, his business, his friends, and so forth. And obviously, sometime later, the Samaritan came back, talked to the innkeeper. If he owed him anything, paid for it, and went about his way. Can we learn anything from this? Well, one thing we can learn for sure, after this was taking place, the Samaritan didn't go meddling in the guy's life for the rest of either one of their days. He helped the guy, did what he had to right then and there. He took the initiative, the free will that God gave him, the individual responsibility that he gives everybody, but only a few people actually use, to actually do this. Another thing that should be noted, when the Samaritan saw this fellow in the ditch, did he run over to his local legislative body and say, hey, look, guys, I got this guy over the ditch here, and if you guys don't make a special appropriation for him, he's going to die. Obviously, he didn't do that. Point being, he took the responsibility upon himself. Nobody had to mother may I him and tell him, I think you should do this, or I think you should do that. I think this has a lot to do with foreign aid and a lot of the things that we do in this country. We've had some terrible tragedies in this world and in our nation, especially. They seem to be happening more and more frequently as time has gone by. You know, the terrible tornado in Joplin, Missouri alone last year with the loss, incredible damage and the life lost, and you know, we could go on endlessly there. And the thing with Japan, with the earthquake and the tsunami, certainly one of the greatest tragedies or disasters that's happened in modern times. Well, what do we do about things like that? Well, what we did do, that's my understanding anyway, we do understand we have a rather large military, naval force. We've got a Navy scattered around the world, but probably at any given time in the Western Pacific, what we call the Far East, there's probably 50, 75 ships, I'm guessing, I don't know that for a fact. But anyway, our government did have, I believe, 30-some ships go to Japan in the immediate wake of that tsunami and that disaster. My understanding is they spent at least 2 months there. And this means men and equipment and helicopters and just, you know, everything that, and those people needed everything at that time. Point being, I think it's reasonable to compare that situation to that of the Good Samaritan. They were on the scene or near, because from Australia to the Aleutians, and there's probably always quite a number of ships, not too terribly far away, within 1,000 miles or so. And they did what they had to do with what they had to help those that were desperately in need. Now, where are we going to go with this? Is federal aid constitutional? Did anybody ever ask that? Did a lot of things that our government routinely does and we take for granted constitutional? Well, in the case of federal aid or foreign aid, I can tell you right now it's not in there. Is it legal for our government to take taxpayer money and give it to private individuals or corporations? It's not in there. It's unconstitutional, but they do it every day of the week practically. When they bailed out all those billion-dollar banks, when there was a couple of years ago, was that legal? Not hardly. Well, anyway, is it legal to take federal government money out of the Treasury and give it to foreign nations? No, it's not in there. I'm sorry. And people are going to say, well, we've got a heartless bunch of people that wrote our Constitution. What kind of hard-hearted nuts and hard-hearted cases are these? They don't want to help people when they're down and out. They're refusing to do that. You don't understand the Constitution if that is what you think it says. The Constitution was written by we the people. We the states. We wrote the Constitution. The Constitution created the federal government. The Constitution is a contract, an agreement between we the people and the federal government that we created. Okay? The federal government can only do certain things that are in the empowerment clauses in the Constitution. Now, I don't remember what the number is, 18 or 20 or something like that. There's only so many things they can do, and anything that is not mentioned in that, they can't do it. But what does the 10th Amendment say of the Bill of Rights? It says the power is not delegated by the Constitution to the United States. That means to the federal government. The power is not delegated by the Constitution to the federal government, are reserved to the states, respectively, and to the people. The Constitution does not now and never has prevented private individuals, churches and religious organizations, organizations like the Red Cross and the Salvation Army and volunteer charity organizations. It has never interfered with or prevented those kind of organizations or volunteers from doing what the Good Samaritan did. It leaves us totally free, it always has, to get off our duffs and use some of that God-granted initiative that He gave to all of us. Some of us try to use it. Some of us, you know, we have people that we know, they don't even know what it is. They've never done it in their entire life. But there's a lot of people out there that are movers and shakers and can get things done. The Constitution leaves those people totally free to do just that. In my opinion, that is the solution to foreign aid. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say on that, and I just hope, I believe one of the purposes of the Assembly is to open up different avenues, we hope, I hope of it, information on a lot of different subjects which we need clarification on. Oh, the one thing I didn't tell you, at that convention, did that get voted up or did it get voted down? No, it was voted that we should retain the federal aid to foreign countries and so forth. Now, I'm not condemning those that did that and voted for that, because it really is a good sounding thing. And years ago, I used to think it was great too. But I think the only reason is because basically, so many areas, we just don't have all the facts. And if we had all the facts, we would begin to make, I think, the right decisions for ourselves, for our children, and for our country. Thank you for your attention.